At 28 years old, Jiro Tanaka has spent almost 7 years without being in a relationship and is currently unemployed. It has been almost a week since he started living this life of freedom. When he worked at his previous company, he put in almost 120 hours of overtime every month and even worked on holidays, yet he was never paid for all his efforts. The company he worked for was an undisputed black company, and his boss, who made them work through the entire night, was known as the all-night boss. One day, while Jiro is working at the company, his boss approaches him and harshly demands that he hand over yesterday's reports because it is already late. His boss even threatens to fire him, saying that there are plenty of other people who can do his job. Hearing that harsh tone, something inside Jiro finally snaps. He stands up and leaves without even looking back. It is his breaking point, so he simply gathers all of his personal belongings and walks out of the company right away. Even though he is unemployed now, he still finds it difficult to get used to this freedom. After leaving his job, he does not feel guilty and only feels a tiny bit bad for the junior who cares about him, but he is sure that person will be doing fine. Jiro even has enough savings because he never has the time to spend the money he earns. He can live for almost a year without finding another job, but he knows he cannot continue living like this forever and understands that his situation is still quite catastrophic. He spends most of his time smoking in his apartment and occasionally wandering around outside. One day, he goes out to collect his mail. After picking up an envelope, he starts heading back toward his apartment while planning to sleep for the rest of the day. As he looks through the pile of mail, he finds a religious solicitation leaflet along with several job advertisements. While casually browsing through the job listings, one particular flyer catches his attention. Jiro is shocked when he sees that the job being advertised is for a dungeon tester. He cannot believe what he is reading. He does not think that this kind of job actually exists and is certain that somebody has created it as a prank. He still cannot help but read the flyer and is surprised to see that it comes with really good conditions, including dormitories and various other benefits. He decides to put it aside for the time being and sleep first. However, after lying down on his bed, he remains wide awake. As he reaches for a cigarette, he becomes irritated when he realizes that the pack is empty. His thoughts once again drift toward the flyer about the dungeon tester position. It reminds him of how much he enjoyed playing RPG games in the past. He still even has a pile of game CDs stored away. Sitting up on the bed, he becomes increasingly curious about the whole thing. It seems strange that someone would go through so much effort to create such an attractive job advertisement if it is nothing more than a prank. As he thinks about it, Jiro realizes that he has not done any sword practice for quite a while despite having some experience in kendo. He picks up a sword and decides that even if the whole thing is a prank, he currently has plenty of free time on his hands. Because of that, he might as well go and see what kind of people are behind it. With that in mind, he calls the number written on the flyer and receives a response from someone named Suera. Suera, who introduces herself as the direct recruitment officer, sounds surprised that he is speaking Japanese. The next day, Jiro decides to visit the location. Upon arriving, he is surprised by the sheer size of the building. He has never heard of a company called Mao before, but he decides to enter anyway. The moment he steps inside, he is shocked to see several girls with unnaturally long ears sitting behind the reception desk. He introduces himself and mentions that he is there for the dungeon tester interview. One of the girls invites him to come with her and introduces herself as Suera. As Jiro sits in the waiting area, he cannot help but notice the girl's unusually long ears and dark complexions. He is certain that people in this country do not normally look like this and starts wondering if he has somehow wandered into a movie studio. Just then, a cup of coffee suddenly comes floating toward him. He quickly catches the cup and carefully examines it, but he cannot find anything suspicious. A moment later, another woman approaches him and inquires whether the coffee is acceptable. She once again introduces herself as Suera and informs him that she will be conducting his interview. Jiro immediately stands up in a rush as Suera motions for him to follow her. As they walk, he notices how admirable and beautiful she looks. Suddenly, a pen slips from Suera's hand. Both she and Jiro crouch down at the same time to pick it up. While reaching for the pen, Jiro accidentally touches her hand and immediately feels what seems like an electric jolt run through him. He quickly pulls back and repeatedly apologizes for the accidental contact. Soon afterward, the two of them are seated inside an interview room. As the interview begins, Jiro notices Suera's long ears but chooses not to comment on them. To his surprise, she opens the interview by asking him what he thinks of her appearance. The question catches Jiro completely off guard, and for a moment he cannot think of a proper response. After hesitating, he quietly mumbles that she looks like a dark elf. Once he gives his answer, he sits there nervously while Suera continues staring at him without saying anything. The silence makes him extremely uncomfortable. A strange wind suddenly surrounds him for a brief moment, and Jiro finally lets out a sigh of relief when the sensation comes to an end. He cannot believe the kind of answer he just gave during an interview, but to his complete shock, Suera suddenly announces that he has passed. She reasons that since he is able to see her true appearance, it is only natural that he possesses a high magical power aptitude. Feeling a bit confused, Jiro asks if she means real magic. Suera confirms that she does and snaps her fingers, causing a burst of flames to appear above her head. She describes magical power aptitude as something similar to a person's natural vessel capacity. It determines how much magical power someone can store and utilize, and it is measured on a scale from 0 to 10. She further notes that this value can never be changed or increased. A person born with a magical power level of 0 will never be able to use magic for their entire life. Suera then reveals that his magical power aptitude is at least level 4. Jiro is confused about how she is able to determine that. In response, Suera discloses that they have actually been testing him long before the interview officially began. Jiro does not remember undergoing any tests, so Suera proceeds to outline each one in detail. The first test is the flyer itself. According to her, anyone below level 1 magical power aptitude will only see the flyer as a blank piece of paper. The second test is the barrier surrounding the building. Only people with at least level 2 magical power aptitude are capable of passing through it. The third test involves the receptionists. Their true appearances are concealed using low-level concealment magic. Anyone below level 3 magical power aptitude will simply perceive them as ordinary humans. The fourth and final test is Suera herself. Only people with a magical power aptitude of level 4 or higher are able to see her true appearance. Suera also mentions that she evaluated his personality earlier when the two of them accidentally touched hands. Since he successfully passes all of the tests, he fulfills every requirement necessary for the position. Afterward, Suera begins detailing the true nature of the job. She informs him that the Demon Army is currently engaged in a war against the residents of Light in another world. The most important fortress connecting the two worlds is the dungeon. Whenever a new Demon King appears, a hero is dispatched by the forces of Light to challenge the dungeon. With a determined expression, Suera emphasizes that the hero must never be allowed to conquer the dungeon. In order to create an absolutely impenetrable dungeon, they need his assistance as a dungeon tester. Everything still sounds unbelievable to Jiro, but when Suera wonders whether he would like to see the dungeon for himself, he immediately agrees. The two of them leave the interview room together. As they walk through the corridors, Jiro is surprised to overhear goblins casually talking among themselves. Along the way, he also encounters various other strange creatures, including a demon fairy and a cat lady. The further they go, the more unusual sights he witnesses. When Jiro slows down to look around, Suera inquires whether he finds everything surprising. With a smile, Jiro replies that he actually thinks everyone there is incredibly beautiful, including Suera herself. The moment the words leave his mouth, he realizes how strange they sound. He quickly tries to pass it off as a joke, but Suera still blushes deeply after receiving the compliment. Soon they arrive at a room where Suera remarks that it leads directly to the entrance floor of the dungeon. Jiro looks ahead and is completely stunned as he sees a real dungeon with his own eyes for the first time. Suera notes that this particular dungeon belongs to the Demon General Kigyou. She further mentions that there are 7 dungeons in total, each one managed by one of the 7 generals serving under the Demon King. Although she cannot show him every dungeon right now, she still wants to know what he thinks of the place. Jiro simply stands there with his mouth hanging open. He still cannot believe that everything around him is actually real. At that moment, a dragon suddenly flies overhead, startling him even further. Feeling overwhelmed, he sits down on a nearby stone while his body trembles slightly. When he inquires whether he is allowed to smoke, Suera gives him permission. He immediately lights a cigarette in an attempt to calm himself down. As he takes a drag, he quietly mumbles that this is bad because his excitement is already going completely out of control right from the very start. Jiro naturally wonders what will happen if he decides not to take the job. Suera clarifies that many people choose to decline positions like this. Whenever that happens, they are required to perform a memory erasure procedure in order to maintain confidentiality. According to her, the method leaves only a very minor and lasting impact on the human body. If Jiro chooses to leave, he will not remember anything he has seen or learned there. After hearing that, Jiro brings up the war itself. In response, Suera states that she has heard the reason behind the conflict is actually something very trivial. She reveals that the Demon King army originally comes from Ishwar as well. According to the story passed down through the generations nearly 5,000 years ago, the conflict between the people of light and darkness grew so severe that both sides began to see the destruction of everything approaching. In order to prevent the complete ruin of the world, their ancestral moon god divided the light and the dark and transported one side to another world, ultimately saving Earth from destruction. Suera further elaborates that the dungeon was originally created as a pathway back home in case peace was ever achieved between the two sides. However, the divide between them was never bridged, and the conflict continued even after thousands of years. Although she has never personally seen Ishwar herself, Suera admits that both her body and soul constantly long for it. She wants to stand upon its soil, bathe beneath its sun, feel its water, and experience the breeze that blows across its lands. She adds that almost every soldier within the Demon King army shares the same dream. Their greatest wish is simply to return to their homeland one day. After hearing the entire story, Jiro remains silent for a moment. He takes some time to process everything before commenting that the situation feels incredibly huge and far beyond anything he has ever imagined. He honestly admits that he does not even know how he is supposed to feel about it. Jiro then confesses that he is actually scared. Everything about this company is far from normal. He realizes that he is merely a jobless man approaching 30 years old and not someone who is at an age where changing careers so drastically should be easy. Part of him wants to throw logic aside and embrace what is happening in front of him, but another part of him is genuinely frightened by everything he has witnessed. The entire situation reminds him of how carefree life felt when he was a child, before reality became so complicated. After thinking about it for a while, Jiro admits that although everything seems frightening, he does have some confidence in himself. He used to practice kendo and believes he has the courage to take on a job like this. More than anything else, Jiro simply cannot ignore what is standing before him. After witnessing a genuine fantasy world with his own eyes and seeing Suera standing before him in all her beauty, he can no longer deny the excitement growing inside him. Finally making up his mind, Jiro stands up and asks Suera whether they would truly be willing to hire someone like him. In response, Suera respectfully bows her head before him and formally welcomes him into the Demon King army. Jiro is standing in his gear while experiencing combat training in this fantasy world. He suddenly jumps back as Suera attacks him with her weapon and strikes him directly. The impact is so powerful that he feels as if he is not wearing any armor at all. Jiro immediately falls to the floor and trembles violently from the pain. He complains that Suera shows absolutely no hesitation despite being a woman, and declares that one day he is definitely going to defeat her. With a slight smile on her face, she walks toward him and asks if he is alright. Jiro only feels more annoyed by the question because he is clearly struggling to recover. Suera appears amused by the situation and casually comments that the attack is light, so he will be perfectly fine. As they stand facing each other, Jiro recalls how he is originally nothing more than an ordinary company employee. Now, however, he has changed his occupation and become a dungeon tester for the Demon King army. According to him, this is exactly why he is currently being bullied by a dark elf. Earlier, Suera told him that he possesses great magical power aptitude. Even so, it will be nearly impossible for him to properly handle magical power in his current state. Because of that, he must learn how to absorb and utilize the magical energy that fills the dungeon itself. Suera explains that she is going to inscribe a magical crest onto his body. This crest will strengthen his body and help him channel the magical power within him. Jiro has no idea what a magical crest actually is, but he lies down on a bed while feeling extremely nervous about what is about to happen. He asks Suera whether the carving process is going to be painful. Her initial response makes him even more nervous, but she soon smiles and explains that she is only joking. According to her, he is not going to feel any pain during the process at all. Suera tells him to remain still as she begins drawing gentle strokes across his chest and back. Just as she promises, Jiro does not feel any pain. Instead, the process only makes him feel slightly ticklish. After some time, Suera announces that she is finished. She clarifies that the crest now only needs a small amount of magical power in order to activate. Before he can even understand what she means, she transfers a portion of her magical power into him. The moment the crest activates, his body undergoes an immediate change. He feels extremely strange as he looks down at himself. According to him, his body suddenly feels much lighter, almost as if gravity itself has weakened. Suera explains that the basic level physical enhancement buff has now been activated. After experiencing this dramatic change, Jiro feels as though he can accomplish anything. Excited by his newfound strength, he immediately decides to test it for himself by jumping around. Before Suera can even warn him, Jiro leaps into the air while completely underestimating his own physical abilities. As a result, he crashes directly into the ceiling. Suera quickly reacts and uses wind magic to safely lower him back down. Jiro sits on the floor feeling relieved that he avoids seriously hurting himself. Suera immediately begins scolding him for recklessly using all of his strength without thinking. However, when she notices that he is actually laughing, she becomes even more frustrated and scolds him once again for taking the situation so lightly. Jiro tries to explain that the experience simply makes him feel a bit childish and excited. Suera, however, warns him that he is eventually going to hurt himself if he keeps behaving that way. She then tells him to put on some comfortable clothes. After that, she explains that his body has already transcended the physical limitations of an ordinary human. Because of this, he should not be so careless about his newfound abilities. Jiro simply agrees with her advice. While changing, he notices that all of the marks that appear on his body during the crest inscription process have completely disappeared. Afterward, Suera says that it is time to examine his status. She takes out a tablet-like device and explains that it operates using magical power and is capable of measuring a person's abilities. Jiro immediately becomes excited when he sees it. Looking over the various values and qualities displayed on the tablet makes him feel especially thrilled because it reminds him of the status screens he always sees in games. Jiro excitedly looks at his status and reads his level. Curious about the result, he asks Suera whether it is considered high. Suera explains that most adults in this area, called Nihoshi, possess less than average physical strength, making his current status quite respectable. As she continues looking through his status sheet, Suera suddenly points out that his nicotine addiction level is completely abnormal. She suggests that it would be best for him to quit smoking if possible. Jiro says that he will try to stop, although he is not entirely confident that he can actually do it. He then comments on how amazing the magical crest truly is and admits that he wants to test his strength even further. Hearing that enthusiasm, Suera suggests having a mock battle. Jiro immediately agrees to the idea. However, now that he is actually standing in front of Suera and struggling just to keep up with her, he finds himself wanting to take those words back. The moment the battle begins, he quickly realizes just how strong she really is. When Suera charges toward him again, Jiro tells himself that she is still his opponent. Even if he is going to lose, he at least wants to put up a decent fight. Motivated by that thought, he loudly challenges Suera to attack him again. Unfortunately, his determination does not produce the results he hopes for. Suera's weapon immediately slams into his head, sending him crashing straight to the ground. Standing beside him, Suera comments that confidence is certainly an admirable quality. However, she also believes that people should only attempt such reckless moves when they are reasonably certain they can win. Jiro is completely knocked out and ends up lying there unconscious. Rather than hearing her lecture, he accidentally gets a glimpse of Suera's clothing while lying on the ground. Later, he sits across from Suera while she examines the large bump that forms on his head. She performs a healing spell, and the pain quickly fades away. Seeing how interested he is in the magic, Suera explains that she is a wizard, so healing and support magic come naturally to her. At the same time, she quietly admits to herself that she once again goes overboard during training. She also finds herself feeling embarrassed about her choice of clothing on a daily basis. A little later, Jiro asks how he manages to get completely overpowered by a wizard. To him, that seems like proof that he lacks talent. Suera immediately disagrees with that conclusion. She explains that a magical crest functions by absorbing magical power and releasing it throughout the body. Once it takes root, it develops and grows much like a plant. She further explains that even if someone possesses tremendous potential, daily training remains essential. A person's status grows according to their effort and experience. Hearing this explanation, Jiro finally understands why he is still only level 1. For the time being, Suera suggests that they stop sparring with each other. Even so, she remains extremely surprised by the fact that his magical aptitude reaches level 8. According to her, that level of aptitude suggests that he possesses the potential to become a general class individual. Jiro is confused by her reaction. He does not feel particularly special and asks whether his aptitude is really that impressive. Suera strongly insists that it is. According to her, his potential is roughly 4 times greater than her own. Jiro still finds it difficult to believe and assumes that there must be many people who surpass him. His humble attitude begins to annoy Suera slightly. She tells him that he has already become the main topic of discussion within the personnel department. Everyone considers themselves incredibly fortunate to have discovered someone like him. What she does not tell him is that she personally spends a great deal of time bragging to everyone about finding such a promising recruit. Suera then explains that sooner or later she will no longer be able to help him with everything. Because of that, he needs to start believing in himself. Jiro is still struggling to fully accept her words as Suera explains that, to the Demon King army, he is practically a ray of hope. Suddenly, she steps closer to him and grabs his hand. Looking unusually serious, she almost begs him never to quit. Suera cannot bring herself to tell him just how chaotic the personnel department currently is. Recruiting new employees has become incredibly difficult, and very few people have been coming to them lately. She admits that if he refuses to join, the department might never fully recover from the situation. A moment later, she realizes how close she is standing to him and quickly lets go of his hand. Embarrassed by her own behavior, she steps back and apologizes. After getting past the awkward moment, the two of them continue their mock battle. Later, while walking through the corridors, Jiro recalls how the second half of the training session turned out to be completely one-sided. He does not manage to win a single match against Suera, and he feels somewhat embarrassed by just how badly he loses. Eventually, he heads toward his assigned department. Since he has decided to work for the Mao Corporation, he has also chosen to move into the company's residential housing. As he approaches the building, Jiro still cannot believe that they are able to provide accommodations of this scale. All of the company housing is located there. When he finally enters his dormitory room, He is stunned by how spacious it is. The place contains numerous facilities and is almost large enough for an entire family. There is even a loft inside. He proceeds to inspect the room in greater detail. When he enters the bathroom, he discovers a massive bathtub. Even the refrigerator in the kitchen is surprisingly huge. After enjoying a relaxing bath, Jiro sits down on the sofa and begins thinking about what Suera told him earlier. She explains that leaking information from this place is extremely difficult, which is likely one of the reasons employees live so close to the workplace. The more he thinks about it, the more satisfied he becomes with his new living arrangements. He genuinely likes the room and feels grateful for everything he has been given. Suddenly, his eyes fall upon the tablet used for measuring status. Feeling curious, he picks it up and decides to take another look at his status. It makes Jiro really happy to see his status increasing, and he feels genuinely impressed by his own growth. He cannot believe that he has actually improved, even after being completely beaten up in the mock battle. He has never experienced anything like this in his previous job, and he slowly begins to feel that switching careers was the right decision. For the first time, he feels a sense of satisfaction about his current situation. There is also another positive aspect of this job, Suera. He recalls how she used to call him by his surname, but now she has started calling him Jiro instead. This small change gives him even more motivation. Feeling encouraged, Jiro decides that he will do his best starting from tomorrow. Suera wakes up calmly and moves around her house quickly while getting ready for the day. After dressing up, she checks Jiro's profile and quietly mumbles that he must already be in the lecture room at this time. As she says this, Jiro is already sitting in the lecture hall, feeling annoyed by how noisy it is. He notices how large the place is, yet it feels strangely empty, which makes it clear that the personnel department is struggling to recruit people. Just then, their teacher announces that the lecture is about to begin. The professor explains that he will be teaching them about the demons present in the dungeon. He states that there are basically two types of monsters. The first type is soul demons, and the second type is blood demons. In general, soul demons have bodies made entirely of magical power, and when they are killed, they simply disappear. Meanwhile, blood demons possess physical bodies and leave behind corpses when they are killed. Their capabilities are 3 to 10 times higher than those of soul demons. He further explains that magical ability grows by fighting demons. The more they fight, the more their power increases, and that is how they become stronger. The professor adds that if they ever encounter a blood demon, it is better to run away as they are far beyond what most of them can handle. Of course, they can request help and use safety measures on the spot, but even then, survival is not guaranteed, and there is no assurance that they will escape unharmed. Seeing the terrified expressions of the students, the professor decides to shift the topic. He explains that although it is said that soul demons disappear upon death, there is a possibility that they leave something behind in this world, known as drops. These drops are extremely valuable raw materials. After describing soul-type demons, he adds that drops from blood demons are traded at a high value, and everyone is allowed to collect and sell these items freely. The purchase of drops is handled at the company's central facility, and students are required to use that system. It is not possible to take drop items outside the premises, so it is better to sell them there. Otherwise, they will simply decay and become useless. Hearing all of this, Jiro suddenly raises his hand and asks whether it means they can keep the drops as a bonus. The professor is surprised by the question and responds that there are indeed bonuses for it and separate bonuses as well. Jiro is shocked to learn that this place actually has such incentives. If students choose to hunt blood demons, they are allowed to keep all the money they earn, which means it is possible to make a significant income here. The professor is surprised to see how excited Jiro becomes. Meanwhile, Jiro recalls how his previous company never had any bonuses at all. The boss had openly stated that there were no bonuses, which made him realize how terrible his old workplace truly was and how this new company feels like heaven in comparison. He becomes so emotionally moved by this realization that tears begin to form in his eyes. The lecture then ends and the professor asks if anyone has questions, but no one responds. He then outlines the final step, which is the submission of answer sheets for job selection. There are 3 main job choices: Vanguard, Ranger, and Rear Guard. Everyone must choose one, and each role has different skills and training paths, so they are advised to think carefully before deciding. He states that those who have made their decision can leave. The students immediately begin discussing and trying to decide their roles. Most of them lean toward wizard-related positions, excited by the idea of learning magic in the company. A few girls appear especially interested in the possibility that Professor Royce might personally teach them magic. Jiro sits quietly in his seat, observing the room. He notices that many people are choosing rear guard roles. He understands their reasoning since this is a magical company and they will need to use magic in combat situations. However, he does not agree with their choices. Instead, he decides that he will choose the Vanguard role as his position. Somewhere deep inside a dungeon in hell, 2 unusual-looking men are having a conversation about a new recruit. They talk about how they become curious after hearing that this newcomer possesses a magical aptitude of 8. The other man replies that the individual does not look very impressive. Jiro is standing in front of them, trembling slightly as sweat forms on his forehead. He looks at his new instructors in fear, realizing that they are a demon and a mummy. He never expected instructors like this and whispers to Suera that this situation does not feel good. Suera tries to introduce the two instructors to him, but she is interrupted by the mummy, who points out that Jiro is not speaking much. The mummy introduces himself as Fusio, while the demon introduces himself as Kigyou. They both announce that they will be his personal instructors and greet him. They completely ignore Jiro afterward and continue speaking among themselves. Kigyou asks Fusio about Jiro's soul, staring at him closely. Fusio replies that his soul looks dim, dull, and slightly muddy. Jiro cannot understand what they are talking about. Kigyou then turns to Suera and says that Jiro is clearly not the person she described. Suera, slightly annoyed, replies that Jiro has just joined the company, so it is natural for him to be weak at the moment. Kigyou points out that she was the one who had been praising him so highly before. Suera quickly changes the topic and says that the situation is a bit sudden, but she is still grateful for their cooperation. However, she requests that they go easy on the new recruit. Kigyou comments that she seems overly protective. When Suera insists that Jiro is actually very capable, Kigyou and Fusio tease her further, implying that she is simply trying to have fun in the personnel department. At that moment, Jiro suddenly raises his voice and says that he wants to ask a question. Once he gets their attention, he asks whether he is the only person who has chosen the vanguard job. Kigyou replies that yes, he is the only one, meaning he will receive both of them as his instructors. Kigyou adds that they even have the entire training ground to themselves, so Jiro should be grateful for such generous treatment. They then ask if he is afraid of being alone. Jiro calmly responds that since he is already here, that is all that matters. Suera begins to worry about him. Kigyou then asks whether all humans are like this. With a thin, mocking smile, he says that if Jiro is as fragile as he looks, it will be disappointing. He tries to provoke Jiro into attacking first. Jiro does not respond, realizing that they are deliberately trying to provoke him. Even so, he refuses to back down and takes a step forward instead of running away. Standing firmly in front of them, he says that he looks forward to their guidance and support, and even asks them to go easy on him. Suera watches anxiously, worried about how he is handling the situation. Kigyou chuckles at his response, seemingly amused that Jiro is showing a bit of confidence. Fusio also appears pleased that Jiro is not acting ashamed or intimidated. After this exchange, they both agree to begin his training. Still concerned, Suera once again tells them to take proper care of Jiro. Kigyou steps forward first and tells Jiro to attack him from any direction, promising that he will go easy on him. Jiro is surprised to see that Kigyou is only holding a rod. Before he can make a move, Suera suddenly shouts from the side, warning him that anything Kigyou holds becomes as powerful as a magical sword. Jiro realizes once again that this is a real fantasy world. Even if they are trying to underestimate him, he decides that he will not back down. Determined to prove himself from the very beginning, he prepares himself as he charges toward Kigyou with full strength. When Jiro strikes Kigyou on the side of his face, it only mildly irritates the demon. Kigyou immediately strikes back while muttering that Jiro needs to think properly before attempting to hit him. His single counterattack is enough to send Jiro crashing to the ground, and his protective gear is instantly torn apart from the impact. Suera shouts from the side and quickly runs toward Jiro. He rolls across the ground before finally coming to a stop. She is shocked to see how damaged his body and equipment are. Without wasting time, she removes his helmet as he struggles to breathe, coughing heavily before slowly regaining consciousness. Fusio, the mummy, comments that Kigyou is still as strong as ever, just like before. When Suera scolds him, he quickly apologizes and adds that everything is fine since Jiro receives treatment in time. However, Fusio also points out that Jiro might leave as soon as he wakes up before they can discuss anything further. Jiro coughs and slowly regains full awareness. As he sits up, both instructors are surprised that he is not as weak as he initially appeared. After waking, Jiro asks whether that was the full extent of their strength. Fusio replies that what Jiro experiences is similar to being hit directly without any protection, implying how overwhelming the attack was. Jiro remembers that he cannot see the attack coming at all and even wishes that Suera had recorded it for him. Kigyou laughs at his reaction and tells him to get up if he wants to go again. Before Jiro can respond, Suera immediately shouts that they will not continue today. However, Jiro interrupts her and insists that he still wants to continue. He struggles to stand on his feet, while Suera no longer argues and only advises him to change his armor first. Looking down, Jiro is shocked to see that his armor is completely shattered. After replacing his equipment, Jiro realizes that he had almost died just moments ago. This frustrates him, especially because it has been a while since he last faced something like this, and he almost forgets what it feels like to be in a real combat situation. Despite the danger, his determination grows even stronger. He prepares himself to strike again, ignoring the risks, while Suera warns him not to push himself too far due to his condition. As he picks up his sword, he once again asks his instructor to come at him. After the exchange, Fusio asks Kiyo for his opinion. Kiyo responds that at first he was unsure, but now he can confidently say that Jiro is a suitable candidate. As Suera tries to pull Jiro aside, they decide that this much training is enough for the day. Kiyo comments that it is unusual to see someone so reckless within the Demon King army. Fusio adds that soldiers usually shine when they are full of life, but in Jiro's case, his soul seems to shine even when he is on the brink of death. He explains that even when Jiro is in pain and unable to move, his eyes still show determination. Because of this, Fusio describes Jiro's soul as dim and dull, similar to rugged steel. Kiyo does not take it seriously and instead jokes that Jiro looks like a bald-headed cockroach. Both instructors are immediately scolded by Suera, who says she had a bad feeling when she learned that 2 of the 7 generals would be involved in training Jiro. Now she is certain that this type of training may end up damaging a talented individual. Kiyo casually responds that Vanguard fighters cannot be trained gently and assures her that Jiro will grow stronger in the future. Fusio also adds that Jiro is now looking much more stable than before. He then announces that he will take responsibility for Jiro's training the next day. As they finalize the training plan, Suera looks at Jiro and quietly mumbles that she will protect him. Seeing her reaction, the instructors become curious and ask whether she is friends with Jiro. Kiyo comments that it seems like spring has finally arrived for her. He jokes that he has heard dark elves are passionate when it comes to love, but he never expected her to choose someone from another world. Suera becomes visibly flustered by their comments, her face turning deeply red as she struggles to respond. The next few weeks are extremely difficult for Jiro, as he struggles just to survive. From the day he chooses to become a vanguard, his life turns into a living hell. Every day he endures brutal training under his instructors. Fusio trains him to counter wizards, but his methods are so harsh that Jiro becomes convinced he will not survive much longer. Meanwhile, Kiyo focuses on improving his close combat skills as a vanguard, and his training is equally relentless, leaving Jiro beaten down day after day. He starts to feel as if his instructors are actively trying to kill him. As time passes, other frustrations begin to weigh on him as well. While walking to class, he overhears girls whispering about how exhausted and broken he looks every day, even calling him a failure. The same nickname spreads among his classmates. Later, he learns that most of the other students are much younger than him. Suera explains that he is the only one who changed his job, while the rest are regular part-timers who are significantly younger. Because of this age gap and his constant injuries from training, he becomes an easy target for ridicule among the students. This makes him extremely angry, but he cannot do anything about it. Even though he feels isolated and frustrated, he still has more important things to focus on. He must endure the harsh training if he wants to become stronger. During one of the training sessions, Kiyo tells him that several months have already passed since they began training him. He says that Jiro needs to endure this phase and continue growing stronger, and he instructs him to prepare for an upcoming joint training session. Soon after, all the students are gathered inside the dungeon when a beautiful woman appears and tells everyone to listen carefully. She announces that they are going to conduct a final training session. The woman is introduced as Evia, the head of the Human Resource Department. She explains that the session is a dungeon combat experience in which students from all job classes are gathered together to fight. Their task is simple. They must repel soul demons that emerge from a magic circle for 1 hour. As time passes, the enemies will become stronger. They are not allowed to leave the area during the session, but she guarantees that they will survive. However, if anyone feels they cannot continue, they may escape through her barrier, though doing so will mark them as someone who has quit. She adds that they are free to form groups if they wish. With a final warning not to disappoint her, she tells them to get ready. Standing alone at the side, Jiro observes the other participants and notices why there are so many wizards. He is also surprised to see a magic swordsman, something he did not even know existed. Soon, Evia signals the start of the exercise. A flash of lightning appears in front of them as the dungeon opens, and the heads of goblins emerge from the magic circle. Jiro closely observes them and notices that they are different from the goblin employees he has seen before, as these are purely formed from magic. Some of the students find the goblins disgusting and are overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. The wizards quickly begin casting spells, attacking the incoming enemies with magic. Jiro is amazed to see humans using magic so freely, though he also feels that they are not on the level of Instructor Fusio. As he watches the wizards handle the goblins easily at first, he begins to regret choosing the vanguard role. The wizards grow more confident as they continue attacking, dismissing the goblins as harmless and weak. However, Jiro soon notices that the situation begins to change. The wizards start to feel pressured as the goblins increase in number and begin pushing them back. Their concentrated attacks start to lose effectiveness, and they become visibly tired, even running out of resources. Because the wizards focus their attacks in one direction, the soul goblins split into two groups and prepare a pincer attack. One of the goblins suddenly moves toward a girl standing at the side. Jiro immediately notices the danger. Without hesitation, he rushes in and destroys the goblin with a single strike of his sword. Seeing the girl sitting on the ground, trembling in fear, he shouts at her to get up, telling her that she becomes an easy target while staying in that position. Jiro quickly jumps into action and activates his monkey screaming skill. He stands in place and screams loudly, releasing sound waves that repel the goblins away from him. He feels relieved when he notices that the enemies stop advancing. He immediately turns toward the wizards and tells them to keep moving until the situation is under control. He says that he will handle one side while they take care of the other. Jiro knows that this skill is extremely difficult to use, but he still grips his sword with both hands and launches a powerful strike. When he sees goblins crashing to the ground, it motivates him and convinces him that he can actually handle these enemies. Just then, one of the goblins slaps him across the face, causing Jiro to stumble backward. However, the hit only makes him angrier, and he quickly turns around and kills the goblin. As Jiro continues fighting, he remembers the faces of his instructors. He realizes that he has already been through hell repeatedly, and compared to that, this kind of attack feels insignificant. He also thinks that if he retreats now, his instructors will definitely punish him afterward. After some time, several wizards begin leaving through the portal, completely exhausted from the battle. Jiro becomes slightly annoyed by this, as their departure causes the group to become outnumbered. He notices that even though less than 30 minutes have passed, many of them are already quitting. To Jiro, the situation feels like a death march, but he does not give up. He is used to this kind of overworking from his previous job, so he pushes forward without hesitation. In a viewing room, Kiyo laughs while watching Jiro fight, thinking that he is completely insane. Fuzio and the other generals of the Demon King army also find Jiro extremely interesting. Suera is the only one who appears worried as she watches him being constantly attacked. She feels that they should have taught him some magic to better support himself. Hearing this, Kiyo replies that Jiro does not have the strength to learn magic at his current stage, and if they had forced him into it within a month, it would have caused problems for Suera instead. The group then turns its attention to another instructor, commenting that she seems to be having a difficult time training him. The woman, Lunaria, one of the generals of the Demon King army, does not offer any excuses. Fuzio also states that they cannot blame Suera, as she already has many students to manage. Just then, someone else arrives and asks if they are watching something interesting. The group immediately bows in respect, not expecting his presence. The newcomer, the president, tells them to act normally and not be so formal. He then asks why they are there, and he replies that he came because of the rumored individual he has been hearing about. He wanted to see for himself. As he observes Jiro fighting fearlessly on the screen, his curiosity increases, and he expresses that he would like to meet Jiro in person. In the classroom, Instructor Idia announces that the initiation ceremony is about to begin. After completing the training tests, a total of 44 full-time and part-time employees have been officially hired by the company. Jiro hears this with surprise, noticing how the number of recruits has dropped significantly. Still, he understands it after everything they have gone through during training. Suddenly, he notices a handsome man sitting near him. He does not realize that the man is actually the president. Curious, Jiro wonders if this person is also an employee. At that moment, the president asks if he is Jiro Tanaka. Before he can respond, Evia announces that they will now welcome the president. The man casually stands up and walks toward the stage while lightly humming. When he arrives, Evia gently scolds him for behaving so carelessly. He simply apologizes and tells her to relax a bit. He then approaches the microphone, introduces himself as the president, and says that he is counting on everyone. With a bright smile, he tells them not to be afraid of him and to remember his face rather than the fact that he is their president. He ends his speech with a playful wink, while Jiro trembles slightly in his seat. The president further announces that all facilities and dungeons will be fully opened once the initiation ceremony concludes. Afterward, Suera approaches Jiro and congratulates him on officially joining the company. Jiro is still shocked, explaining that he had no idea the president had been sitting beside him casually all along. Suera explains that the president is a very carefree person. She adds that he was actually the one who suggested entering this world in the first place, and that this carefree nature is part of his charismatic personality. For Jiro, it is his first time meeting someone like that. Suera further mentions that the president is also the one who strongly wishes to return to Ishwar. She then quickly changes the topic and suggests that they should go shopping first. Jiro is confused, so Suera explains that there is a large shopping mall located in the basement of the building, where he can find everything he needs, including armor and weapons. When they arrive, Jiro is shocked by how massive the place is. Suera suddenly says that she originally wanted to help him, but she has work to attend to, so he is on his own. She tells him to explore the mall by himself before leaving. Jiro looks around the enormous space in amazement. There are so many shops that he quickly realizes he cannot spend the entire day wandering around. Since he also has a limited budget, he decides to visit only a few stores and complete his shopping efficiently. As he walks through the mall, he notices a very petite girl struggling to carry a heavy box alone. He quickly goes over to help her, commenting that she looks very pale and asking if she is alright. The girl reveals her fangs and says that she is a vampire. Jiro is surprised, but continues speaking calmly, saying that this is too much work for one person, and asks whether her shop has not opened yet. He also asks if she is working alone. The girl explains that her family members said they did not want to do business with aliens and return to the Demon world. Because of that, she is the emergency substitute and must run the shop entirely on her own. Jiro is annoyed by this, thinking how irresponsible that is. He immediately says that he will help her for a while. For the next few minutes, Jiro helps her move heavy boxes and organize the shop. While walking ahead, he briefly feels something strange, but when he turns around, the girl appears completely normal. Once everything is arranged, Jiro thanks her and says that he is looking to buy a sword. Hearing this, the vampire recommends a shop called Frog Horse Show. She explains that the building has an exterior made of black bricks, and the signboard features a horse show with unusual lettering. Jiro finds the name strange, so she explains that it means "I will forge what does not exist." Satisfied with the guidance, Jiro thanks her and leaves after waving goodbye. Soon, Jiro reaches the recommended shop. As he enters, he is surprised to see an extremely large man standing inside, taller and more intimidating than even his instructors. Feeling slightly nervous, Jiro explains that a vampire recommended this place and that he is here to buy a sword. The shopkeeper apologizes for the vampire's behavior and then asks if he is a vanguard swordsman. After confirming his identity, the shopkeeper reacts with recognition, surprised that everyone seems to already know about him. He then explains that during a recruitment party, Suera had gotten drunk and talked about Jiro extensively in the HR department. Because of that, Jiro has become somewhat well known within the company. Jiro feels slightly annoyed at Suera for spreading his name everywhere. Coming back to the present, the shopkeeper asks if he has any questions. After thinking for a moment, Jiro asks whether he should spend his money on armor or weapons first. The shopkeeper immediately replies that he should prioritize a weapon, explaining that it is better to be offensive than defensive. Jiro asks why. The giant man explains that armor can block attacks, but even if it protects him, it does not help him defeat the enemy. Without offense, he will only keep taking damage. Therefore, it is better to avoid being hit in the first place. Jiro realizes that this is not a game. Getting hit here has real consequences. The shopkeeper continues, explaining that defense is about patience, while victory comes from destructive power. Jiro finds this way of thinking surprisingly straightforward and begins to respond, thinking that it means he should. Jiro completes his thought. If he cannot escape a situation, then he must kill before he is killed. In other words, he needs to aim to win first. After receiving the advice from the giant shopkeeper, Jiro agrees to buy a sword first and says he will use whatever money remains to purchase armor afterward. The shopkeeper points toward the racks filled with beginner-level weapons and tells him he is free to choose from there. As Jiro begins inspecting the different swords, he suddenly feels drawn toward one in particular. It has a strange black stone embedded within it. Standing in front of it, he stares at the weapon for a moment. The shopkeeper notices this and asks if he has found something interesting, but his expression is not entirely pleased. When Jiro asks if there is a problem with the sword, the shopkeeper explains its origin. He says that the blade comes from a mineral tree. These trees are originally planted in the ground and grow by absorbing magic. They develop trunks as hard as iron and are essentially living minerals. The black substance on the handle acts as a sealed core. Because of their properties, these trees are used as resources as they are generally superior to iron. The shopkeeper continues explaining that most blacksmiths forge swords by harvesting these trees while they are still young saplings. They then process them into weapons, which continue to grow afterward by absorbing magical energy. This explanation surprises Jiro. The shopkeeper further adds that if the sword matures properly, it can become harder and sharper than mithril and may even change shape depending on its wielder's will. Some of these mineral tree weapons eventually become legendary swords. Jiro immediately sees it as an incredible weapon, but the shopkeeper quickly shuts down that excitement. He explains that only 1 in 10,000 grows into even a normal usable sword, let alone a legendary one. Most mineral trees fail to develop properly and end up shattering. Because of this unpredictable nature, these weapons are sometimes called the tears of blacksmiths. They grow and evolve on their own by absorbing the user's magic, and the blacksmith has very little control over their final outcome. For every success, there are countless failures, either tears of joy or sorrow. Despite the warning, Jiro slowly raises his hand and reaches for the sword, ignoring the shopkeeper's concerns. The moment he grips it, he feels something strange. It is as if he has been holding the weapon for years already. The sword gives him the uncanny sensation that it is alive and aware of him. Seeing Jiro's reaction, the shopkeeper asks whether he was even listening to anything he just said and reminds him once again that it is a risky choice. Jiro acknowledges the warning, but still says that this sword feels like a signal to him. Just like when he first joined the company, he feels the same strange excitement that makes everything else seem irrelevant. With a small smile, he declares that he will buy it. The shopkeeper sighs, sensing that this decision may bring trouble later, but he does not argue further. Instead, he says that some people are simply chosen by their weapons, and it seems Jiro might be one of them. As a merchant, it is his job to sell weapons to people like that. As Jiro leaves the shop holding the sword, he quietly reflects that both sitting idle and risking everything feel strangely similar now. Like both can lead to destruction or change. The shopkeeper finally accepts his decision and even includes free maintenance and cleaning tools for the sword. He comments that as a giant he respects people with courage like Jiro, and he looks forward to seeing whether this choice brings him joy or sorrow in the future. Jiro feels a bit relieved that he can finally begin his long-awaited work after this training period and focus on his original objective, creating a dungeon that even a hero cannot conquer. Right now, he is standing inside a dungeon and fighting against soul-type creatures. He is currently operating as a first-year dungeon tester in the middle of active combat. The soul demons he faces are extremely strong and keep appearing from multiple directions. Their movements are fast and precise, but Jiro is able to perceive them and respond without hesitation, striking them down one after another as they crash around him. He is determined to survive this harsh training and eventually move on to a real dungeon. Just then, Suera suddenly calls him back. Earlier, she had arranged a meeting with Jiro to give him advice before he officially began his job as a dungeon tester. She explains that the 7 dungeons are each managed by one of the 7 generals. Some of these dungeons are forests, while others are caves. Each dungeon functions like a small world, ruled by its respective general. However, most of the actual work is handled by their subordinates. For example, the Tree Queen is a dark elf, and Suera herself is also serving under one of the generals. Jiro understands that most of the generals exist at a very high level, almost above the clouds, making it unlikely that he will ever meet them directly. Suera does not comment on that, and instead asks whether he has decided which dungeon he wants to visit first. She mentions that many other testers are heading toward the Tree Queen's dungeon. Jiro admits that he was also considering the same option. However, Suera disagrees and says she believes he is more suitable for the King of Machines dungeon. She explains that the floors there are wide, making it easier for him to use large weapons, and even reckless movements will not be a major issue. The enemies in that dungeon are sturdy mechanical-type demons that are difficult to defeat with magic but easier to handle with swords. Jiro thanks her for the advice and asks if he can go all out in that dungeon. Suera replies that he should be careful and urges him not to act recklessly. When Jiro finally arrives at the dungeon, he feels relieved to have space to freely swing his sword. With his newly acquired mineral tree sword, he believes he can handle anything. As he is about to move forward, he notices glowing eyes on the floor and realizes they are drop items. Thinking about profit, he decides to collect them so he can later sell them at the mall. For a brief moment, he becomes distracted by thoughts of earning money, but quickly shakes it off and refocuses on the mission. He reminds himself that everything here is real. He continues fighting through the dungeon, struggling at first but gradually adjusting to the enemy movements. He notices that his monkey screaming skill does not affect these enemies, but he still treats it as a valuable learning experience. Eventually, after pushing through intense battles, he reaches what appears to be the end of the first floor. Feeling he still has energy left, he proceeds up the stairs to the second floor. Carefully stepping forward, he assumes the layout will be similar, allowing him to map the area. However, he fails to notice enemies positioned on the ceiling. Just as he takes a breath of relief, a demon suddenly drops down in front of him. Jiro is startled, realizing he has been ambushed immediately upon reaching the second floor. Even so, he considers this exactly the kind of first real kill experience he expected from a dungeon. He does not hesitate, and quickly draws his sword, preparing to face all incoming enemies. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Evia and another instructor are reviewing student performance scores. Most students have only 2 or 3 points, while some even have negative scores. One instructor comments that the situation is not looking good. They also report receiving complaints from testers, including groups that failed on the first floor. One group even complained that no one warned them about giant wolves appearing in the dungeon. Some students have requested that the difficulty be reduced, which confuses the instructors, as the purpose of the test is meant to be challenging. However, they are not particularly surprised, as they already expected poor results after reviewing the tester's status. Then they receive another report slightly delayed because most other testers have already returned. Looking at the screen, the instructor suddenly becomes serious. They notice that Jiro is still inside the dungeon, continuing to fight. He is currently engaged in combat against a giant demon with a completely different level of power. Jiro quickly realizes that this is a high-tier soul species with a real physical body made of blood. Unlike the earlier enemies, this one does not vanish easily and has actual mass behind its attacks. He struggles desperately against the monster, taking several direct hits, but he refuses to back down. In the end, he manages to land a final decisive blow and defeats it. In the observation room, Evia is visibly shocked. Jiro has not only defeated a Golem-class enemy, but has also reached the 5th floor entirely on his own. She recalls that the dungeon system is designed in a way where testers are technically safe. Their physical bodies remain protected outside within a barrier, while a magical projection enters the dungeon. Even so, the experience still transmits pain, exhaustion, and even psychological trauma. One of the instructors asks whether Evia actually informed the testers about this system, as it is surprising how quickly a normal human adapts to it. They begin to wonder if Jiro is simply unusual, or possibly just reckless and unintelligent. Despite everything, Jiro continues to fight. When he finally exits the dungeon, his body is covered in blood, and he is visibly exhausted, barely able to stand. He stumbles forward and nearly collapses, but Suera quickly rushes in and catches him before he falls completely. Leaning on her, Jiro mumbles that it was extremely exhausting, but at the same time, he also had a lot of fun at the company. Hearing this, Evia tells the instructor that she will trust Jiro to handle the situation moving forward and instructs them to prepare for the next day. Meanwhile, Suera supports Jiro and carries him toward his room, sighing at how he always gets carried away without considering the consequences. Jiro hesitantly walks toward the room where 3 demon girls are waiting for him. They contacted him the previous night and asked him to meet them, which is why he feels nervous. He keeps wondering whether he has done something wrong. As he enters the room, he has no idea what is going on. To his surprise, the vampire girl he previously met at the mall is also present. He carefully looks around the table and assesses the situation. Several strange devices are placed on top of it, and for a brief moment, he suspects they might be torture instruments. Just then, Evia speaks up. She tells him she did not call him there for anything bad, though she jokingly adds that if he wants to be scolded, she can arrange that. She explains that the 3 objects on the table are magical items. The young vampire girl adds that these items are sold at her shop and are used to measure a person's magical aptitude. Jiro listens as Evia reminds him that the recruitment flyers are the same ones he already knows. The remaining items consist of a pair of glasses and a special incense burner, both used to evaluate magical aptitude. The vampire girl explains that these tools determine the magical potential of humans. He stares at the items, still confused. His reaction annoys Evia slightly, and she gets straight to the point. She says they called him because they want him to help with recruitment. Jiro is shocked. Evia explains they chose him after seeing his abilities and his performance as a dungeon tester. He is also the oldest among the recent recruits, giving him more life experience when dealing with people from the other world. She adds that he has an honest and trustworthy appearance, which makes him suitable for the role. Suera then joins in and explains another issue. Residents of the demon world cannot freely travel outside their world into the human world. Since mana does not exist there, the outside world is like a desert to them. Every second they spend there causes their magical energy to leak away. As a result, they cannot remain there long. In extreme cases, it can even become fatal. Jiro understands, but he is still unsure about accepting the responsibility. Sensing his hesitation, Evia asks if he dislikes the proposal. She quickly adds that the position comes with a salary increase. The moment he hears raise, Jiro immediately agrees. After receiving his answer, Evia explains that recruitment is entirely up to him. He can choose how to approach potential recruits. If he needs help, he may also work with other dungeon testers. Then she realizes he is practically the only person in his department. Evia adds that he will handle recruitment alongside his regular dungeon tester duties, so he must manage both responsibilities carefully. She further explains he is authorized to recruit up to 100 people. The vampire girl introduces herself formally as Memoria and adds that he can request more flyers anytime. After finishing the explanation, Evia leaves the room and entrusts the responsibility to him. Jiro remains standing, overwhelmed. He cannot believe such an important task has been given to him. For the first time in a long while, he feels trusted. Suera suddenly turns to him and apologizes, explaining that recruitment normally belongs to human resources and she feels bad about shifting the burden. Jiro reassures her it is fine. Deep down, he realizes he is being pushed into the role regardless. Still, this situation feels different from his previous job. This time, people are asking for his help because they trust him. That thought gives him satisfaction. Rather than an inconvenience, he sees it as a step forward. He decides he cannot waste this opportunity. Jiro snaps out of his thoughts when Memoria thanks him for helping. He replies that it is fine since he chose it himself. The vampire girl formally introduces herself again. Suera quietly watches their interaction and seems slightly displeased by how smoothly it goes. Before they continue, she interrupts and says introductions are enough. They should focus on the magic items. The three of them examine the tools together. Memoria explains the first item is magical incense. The smoke is actually mana. It has no scent, does not move with wind, and naturally travels toward humans with magical aptitude. Next, she introduces the glasses, which allow the user to see mana flow from the incense and measure approximate magical aptitude. She adds that they are expensive and must be handled carefully. After the explanation, Jiro leaves and goes to a station with heavy foot traffic. Even after half a day, he finds no one with notable aptitude. Several times, he believes he has found a candidate and hands out flyers, only for people to get annoyed after seeing what looks like a blank page. Using the glasses, he notices most people have extremely low magical power. He realizes how difficult this job is. If it is this hard for him, it must be nearly impossible for Demon World residents who cannot stay long outside. Still, he refuses to be discouraged and decides to take it step by step. While waiting, he messages his friend Kaido to meet later. As he checks his phone, something catches his attention. A large flow of mana suddenly moves through the incense. He looks up and sees it heading toward a young boy nearby. The boy has a magical aptitude level of 4. Jiro quickly calls out and offers him a part-time job flyer. The boy takes it but immediately becomes suspicious, thinking it might be a scam or prank. Jiro smiles and explains that people without aptitude see only a blank page. The boy still doubts him. To prove it, Jiro hands over the glasses. The view surprises the boy, but he still suspects it might be advanced VR. Jiro is impressed by his caution and explains he has no reason to deceive him. He begins to understand the type of people the company needs, those with high aptitude and skepticism. To further convince him, he shares his own experience of initially thinking the flyer was suspicious but still following through, which changed his life. He admits it still sounds like a scam. Instead of pushing him, Jiro gives him his business card and tells him to call if he becomes interested. Before leaving, he advises the boy to think carefully, since the job will likely bring hardship. The boy remains behind, staring at the flyer and card, unsure what to think of Jiro. Later that night, Jiro goes drinking with his friend. Kaido, his friend and former co-worker, immediately complains about Jiro quitting without telling anyone and even asks who replaced him. Jiro listens with a faint smile. Kaido had been his junior at the company and, despite his rough personality, is a good person. Jiro had been worried about him when he quit but was too exhausted at the time to think clearly. Now he feels guilty and considers recruiting him. While talking, Jiro casually uses the glasses to check Kaido's magical aptitude and is surprised to find it fairly high. Kaido asks what he is doing now. Jiro says he found a new job at an excellent company with good bonuses, benefits, housing, no overtime, and even beautiful coworkers. He carefully avoids explaining the actual work. Meanwhile, the boy returns home to a messy apartment and calls out to Minami, warning he is coming in. Inside, he finds chaos. The room is covered in trash. He immediately yells at her for not cleaning and wonders how it got this bad since he cleaned recently. He finds Minami relaxing on a beanbag. His frustration grows as she casually acts unbothered. She jokes about her laziness, and he complains that she cannot survive without him. She responds playfully and asks what he brought for dinner. She even teases him about washing her shorts before quickly saying she is joking. Exhausted, he goes to cook stew and reminds her he is only taking care of her because her aunt asked him to. While cooking, Minami notices the flyer and asks about it. He explains a strange man gave it to him near the station. He originally thought it was nonsense but brought it home for her. Suddenly, he realizes something and quickly asks if she can actually read what is on it. Jiro is standing inside Memoria's shop while the vampire girl looks surprised at the large number of items he has purchased. She comments that solo players usually consume more supplies than normal, but even then, this amount is excessive. Curious, she asks if he is planning to do something special with all of it. With a sly smile, Jiro simply replies that they are having a welcome party in one of the halls inside the company building. Meanwhile, Kaido is standing with a weapon in each hand as he fights against a giant lizard. Sweat pours down his face as he complains that this cannot possibly be normal. He cannot believe that he is actually expected to fight a giant lizard like this. Jiro, on the other hand, looks completely satisfied with the situation. He casually comments that he at least had the opportunity to practice with a female instructor before being thrown into combat. Since Kaido is capable on his own, he thinks there is no need to worry. His words only make Kaido more irritated. Jiro quickly reminds him not to lose focus. When Kaido looks ahead, he notices two massive lizards moving toward him at the same time. Realizing he has no choice, he grips both weapons tightly and rushes forward to engage them. Watching from the side, Jiro recalls how Kaido chooses a dual-wielding fighting style. He uses both hands efficiently and fights with two short swords. Surprisingly, Kaido shows considerable talent with the style. However, talent alone is not enough. As he strikes one of the lizards, his attack fails to cause any meaningful damage. Before he can react, the creature swings its tail and smashes him directly. Kaido is sent crashing across the ground. Watching his junior get tossed around, Jiro cannot help laughing at the sight. Eventually, he decides that enough is enough and steps forward to help. He raises his sword and prepares to strike the lizard himself. Earlier, he had asked Suera for a smaller dragon to use during training, but he certainly had not expected something like this. At that moment, Kaido's entire head is trapped inside the lizard's mouth. Unable to do anything else, he desperately looks toward Jiro for help. Seeing the situation, Jiro finally gives in and rushes forward to fight the creature seriously. Meanwhile, Minami and Masaru are observing the battle from above. Minami looks extremely impressed by everything she is seeing. She points out how incredible it is that Jiro is actually fighting something that resembles a dragon. Just then, Suera approaches them and asks whether they finally believe her now. Minami immediately says that she does. Masaru, meanwhile, slowly begins accepting that all of this is actually real. Minami cannot take her eyes off the fantasy-like world unfolding in front of her. For the longest time, she always believed that things like this could never exist. Introducing herself, Minami explains that she is a college student who has spent her entire life feeling lost and directionless. Masaru is her childhood friend. He has always worried about her behavior and constantly looked after her. Even now, she thinks he worries far too much for someone his age. Throughout her life, she has watched everyone around her work hard toward their goals. She sees people struggle, fail, and keep pushing forward. Although she becomes impatient while watching them, she never manages to find anything that truly interests her. She knows she is capable of putting effort into something if she really wants to, but she has never discovered anything worth dedicating herself to. Because of that, she spends most of her time drifting through life without a clear purpose. While living together in the apartment, she repeatedly embarrasses Masaru because of her bold and carefree personality. Despite all the trouble she causes him, Masaru continues looking after her, which only makes her feel that he worries far more than he should. Even though she is uninterested in everything, she still plays games, mostly focusing on fantasy games. Still, she never wants to become a professional gamer or a game creator, which always makes her worried, but right now she thinks that she has finally answered that question. The reason she is uninterested in everything but still continues to play games, she thinks, is because this is what she is actually looking for. Minami stares ahead in wonder, watching Jiro defeat the dragon with amusement. Both Masaru and Kaido are really shocked when Jiro defeats the dragon. There is a bright smile on Minami's face as she thanks Masaru for bringing her here. Suera also says that they will create it if they put their heart into it like Jiro. When they see her smiling like that, they are both amazed by her beauty. Masaru even says out loud that she looks like a goddess, and he does not get scolded for it. Minami says that she actually looks like a goddess and gets scolded by Masaru. When they see Jiro at work, he simply says that he is having fun and agrees to join the company. Externally, Jiro stays calm, but internally, he is almost dancing with joy, happy that he is finally done being alone. The good thing about being solo is that he can do everything at his own pace and no one can stop him from being a little crazy. But whenever he returns from the dungeon, the amount of damage on his body is very different. He realizes that it is not a good idea to rush for success alone while damaging his own body and armor. With all this, Suera also gets worried about him all the time. This reminds him of how Memoria has said that he spends a lot of money on recovery potions and that it would be troublesome if he keeps going solo. This is why Jiro is ready to take Kaido and both the kids into his party, and is even thinking about abusing his personal authority a bit. After dealing with the demon, after fighting the demon dragon, he walks toward Kaido, who is lying on the ground, and asks if he is still alive. From the ground, Kaido says and asks Jiro if he is not a human anymore. With a determined smile, Jiro says that instead of rotting away at a desk job, he decided to become a superhuman. Kaido does not understand him, so Jiro instead asks how he agreed to change jobs so easily. Kaido says that he is just intrigued by how they said it is legal to wave weapons around here. Suddenly, he stands up from the ground, once again determined to take revenge for all those lizards. He shouts that he will do this just for the money and the woman. When Jiro scolds him, Kaido simply says that Jiro was the one who told him about these two things, and that Kaido and Jiro are also here for money and women. The comment is very shocking to Jiro as Kaido points toward the window, and Jiro looks up. Suera is standing there looking at both of them. He gently raises his hand, pretending that he is going to wave, but suddenly turns around and punches Kaido in the face. Kaido instantly complains that it hurts. Kaido says that this magic craft strength punch is going to hurt a lot. As Jiro is playfully messing with Kaido, his former instructors come there asking how they heard about the new vanguards. Kaido asks who these people are, to which Jiro simply answers that they are vanguard instructors. He ignores Kaido's complaining and turns to the side, saying that he was hoping they would train Kaido at some point, but it is not good if they are here on his first day, because he might quit under pressure. His request is ignored as Fujio suddenly kicks him, saying that they both know spoiling Kaido will only make things worse. Kyo adds that Jiro is also making things harder for him. Once they kick Jiro out of the way, they turn to Kaido and say they are looking forward to working with him. Fujio also comments that Jiro is not the best, but he has a good brain. They continue, then suddenly grab Kaido, saying they are looking forward to working with him. Jiro just stands there as they drag Kaido away, ignoring his complaints. He tries to say that he did not sign up for this, but no one hears his shouting. After the interview, both the kids, Minami and Masaru, are hired. Surprisingly, Minami seems really excited as she says that it is okay and she will work herself to death. Jiro quickly says that it is good to be motivated, but dying would be a problem. He suddenly recalls something and asks why she decided to apply here. This time, Masaru steps forward and says he is worried about her. Jiro comments that this kid is really hardworking. Jiro then recalls something and tells Kaido he wants to say something. When Kaido turns toward him, Jiro suddenly grabs his shoulder and warns him to stay away from Minami because he is just a student and also a minor, so if something happens, it will cause problems. Kaido assures him that he will not do anything like that because he wants to go after non-humans. Both kids start their training shortly after that. Kaido and the others learn magic from the elf, who tells them to focus and channel their magic power during class. She teaches them that many old and Christian matters are said to be susceptible to magic, so they must channel their magic into the marble. Minami is really determined as she picks up the stick and does her best to produce magic. The instructor praises Minami for actually managing it, while Masaru is also trying really hard but fails to light the marble. The instructor says it is fine since the energy seems to be coming out of his hand, meaning he is just incompatible with the wand. Turning toward Minami, the professor suddenly asks why she is shaking so much. She replies that this is happening because of the push-ups she did earlier. Masaru points out that she only did 3 push-ups, and hearing that, the professor tells Minami to focus on strengthening her physical core. Meanwhile, Kaido and Jiro are fighting against the instructor Kigyou. He does not seem happy with their performance, and says that even though it is 2 against 1, they are still no match for him. He even points out that Kaido is only getting in Jiro's way. Hearing this, Kaido gets really infuriated and rushes forward to attack the instructor while Jiro shouts that he is getting provoked. As Kaido jumps in, Kigyou casually pushes him away with one hand. Jiro is shocked at how easily Kaido is sent flying, but he gets ready to fight. The instructor Kigyou tells him to attack, saying it has been a while since he beat him. As they face each other, Kigyou asks if he is actually going to do this now, to which Jiro replies that he will only know if he tries. With all these intense training efforts, Jiro almost raises the 3 new recruits himself, even though he was not good at recruiting at the start. Finally, after the long training days, it is their first time venturing into the dungeon as a party. All 3 new recruits are amazed to see a real dungeon in front of them. Jiro tells them this is the Dragon King's dungeon. Kaido struggles a bit to breathe as he points out how thin the air feels. Jiro says it is because of the high altitude and starts giving instructions, telling them to split up as planned. Before that, he asks Masaru to do something, and the boy quickly gets to it. He casts his recovery balance magic, and suddenly the air feels much better, allowing them to breathe easily. Next, he asks Minami to search the area. She casts her enemy search magic skill and scans the surroundings. She reports that there are no signs of enemies, and they are clear to move ahead. Jiro is happy to see how both of them can use their magic. Masaru mainly uses healing magic, while Minami specializes in support and jamming magic. Both strengthen the party in different ways. Just then, Kaido says they will form up, and he will lead. Jiro adds that Masaru and Minami will stay together next, while he goes with Kaido. Even if they die, they are determined to protect the young kids. Finally, they all move ahead. As they walk, Masaru points out that Jiro has changed his equipment, to which he replies that the instructor broke his earlier gear. Just then, Minami casts a spell and senses something, warning Jiro that enemies are ahead. He looks slightly disappointed because they have just entered the dungeon. He says their advantage point seems to be gone and the enemy will find them. He continues that the longer they wait, the closer the enemy gets, so they have no choice but to rush in and act. It feels like a devilish design. Looking determined, he says he will take 2 of them while the others handle the remaining one. They all get ready as Kaido tells Minami to do what she has practiced. She feels a bit hesitant, but still casts her paralyzing shockwave magic, weakening the demon slightly. Once she finishes casting, Masaru tells her to stay back, saying they will handle the rest. Kaido moves forward and attacks the demon with his weapon. Meanwhile, Jiro fights the other two flying dragons, easily cutting them down with his sword. They are amazed by his skill and manage to deal with the situation together. Kaido cheers that they defeated it, while Minami says they are the strongest. Jiro looks at them with a smile, relieved by this new sensation. He realizes he can actually work in a party because it is safer and more efficient than going solo. It almost brings tears to his eyes as he realizes he is finally no longer a lonely, companionless loner. His subordinates notice him crying, and when they question him, Kaido replies in his place, saying it is just the cry of a loner. He even adds that Jiro is not a bad person, just a bit of a pushover. Listening to this, the kids realize everyone has their own problems. Their conversation is interrupted when more demons fly toward them, and they prepare to fight again. As they move through the dungeon, facing hardships and waves of demons, they all become exhausted by the end. When they return to the company, Jiro hands a piece of a crystal dragon wing to Memoria. When she recognizes it, she smiles and asks if they went to the middle. Jiro replies that it took them 3 whole days. He ignores Kaido and Minami, shouting that they almost died and that it was impossible. Memoria is surprised they managed it in only 3 days. Suddenly, Kaido and Minami push Jiro aside as Kaido asks Memoria for lunch. He boldly asks if she has a boyfriend while also saying he is single. Minami also shows interest in the conversation. Memoria replies that if they are okay with it, they can buy it from here. She then hands Jiro 800,000 yen for their mission. After taking the money, Jiro says how nice it is to have a party. Everyone seems slightly surprised by his excitement. Memoria thanks him for the hunting, saying they are grateful. Her expression then turns somber as she adds that they should not push themselves too hard. Later, Kaido tells Jiro it is allowed because they were not told anything about how to handle it. Jiro does not understand, while the younger ones also seem somewhat disappointed in him. He even wants to know what Jiro will do with the money, but does not wait for a response. After hearing Memoria's advice, Jiro turns to his party and says that half of the money will go to the party's funds, and they can split the rest into quarters. Masaru is the only one slightly confused, asking if it is okay to split it equally. Jiro assures him it is fine, saying it can be troublesome to hold back once they are done dealing with the money. Kaido waves goodbye and asks if they are done for the day, then skips away happily. Soon, Minami and Masaru also leave, ready to retire for the day. Jiro waves them goodbye, asking them to share when their next week's shift is. Once he is alone, he feels happy that everything went so smoothly. He now has a reliable boss and subordinates who listen to him, and he is enjoying the results of his work. The only thing he wants is to get better at recruiting. As he walks through the corridor happily, thinking about his achievements, someone suddenly stops him and asks if he is Jiro. The narration drops out. Jiro turns toward the man and responds coldly, asking what he can do for him. Shortly after, the person who spoke ran away from him. As they face each other in the corridor, the president watches them from his room and seems satisfied at how the company is getting more lively. They did not have a good start, but now they are getting closer to their main target. All of his masters seem to agree with him, as Evis says that the testers are also becoming more competitive this time. The president is happy to hear that, but one of his masters does not agree and says they should just kidnap and control them. Another person also agrees, asking why the president is being so reserved. The president first reminds them not to call him Your Highness in this mortal realm. He then adds that if they kidnap the humans, they will be seen as the heroes that Ishal has dispatched. He has heard that they are all humans selected from this world. Evil also has proxies fighting for it. The president understands what his masters are saying, but he thinks there is no clause that forces them to use the same method. If it is inevitable for them to do the same thing, they should still do it with a different approach. He believes they should use a more oblique approach to get the time of God, which is why they built this company in the first place. According to him, their relationship with humans is one of cooperation, and it is a good idea to reject shallow morality. He also adds that, in the first place, they should be ready to fight their own battle. He thinks it would not be interesting otherwise. The president also agrees with him, while another elf says that through humans, they can seek harmony with Ishwal again. She gets made fun of for being an honest student, but she simply thanks them. The president then turns toward Evia and asks about Jiro. Evia replies that Jiro is a very useful man because he brings a lot of stimulus to the company, even if not all of it is positive. Meanwhile, Jiro faces another problem inside the company. Toru seems irritated by his presence and shouts that Jiro's existence is unpleasant. Jiro stands there, confused, as Toru continues. He claims he has heard that Jiro is targeting Evia and the other female employees, and even showing interest in promising new recruits. Masaru says this is a dirty trick and declares that he will not forgive Jiro. Toru shouts that he will not allow anyone to damage the company's morale any further and demands that Jiro resign immediately, or he will have to face his flames. Jiro cannot believe what he is hearing. It frustrates him that Toru does not realize the company is already short on personnel, yet still pushes for his resignation. He cannot understand what reducing manpower is supposed to achieve. He admits he is partly responsible for letting misunderstandings spread within the company. Although he is unhappy about the situation, he does not show hesitation and steps forward. Toru is startled by the movement and warns that these are not empty threats and that he will attack. Jiro remains calm as he approaches and casually reaches into the flame, extinguishing it with his bare hand. He then places his burned hand on Toru's shoulder and says simply that the matter is settled. Later, he briefs his subordinates on what happened. After hearing him, Kaido says he has heard from other employees that Jiro is a sore thumb in the company. Standing out is one thing, he adds, but making enemies is not a good idea. Minami seems oddly pleased to see this side of Jiro, while Masaru worries about whether things will be okay. With a smile, Jiro reassures them that they will be fine, since Toru seems to be targeting only him. The group immediately starts discussing how to respond. Kaido suggests going directly and settling it. Minami thinks a surprise approach would work better. Masaru is the only one against fighting. Jiro listens to them and asks if they are really planning to get involved. All three immediately reply that they are a party, so helping him is obvious. A relieved smile appears on Jiro's face, and he agrees to share his plan. They eagerly wait for details, but he only says that work-related issues should be handled at work. As they walk through the corridor talking, Suera notices them and calls out to Jiro, but he does not hear her, focused on his party instead. Later, Suera meets her friends and mentions that Jiro has been acting strangely lately. They immediately tease her, saying Jiro must be her love interest. One of them adds that Suera is usually sharp about humans, but perhaps she is just lonely because Jiro is not paying attention to her. Suera is surprised by their reaction, but they continue teasing her, saying it makes sense since she has not shown interest in men for 20 years and even rejected Royce. She tries to clarify that she is only worried about Jiro, but they keep joking. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Toru and his party are fighting a goblin demon. He is accompanied by 2 mages, and together they easily defeat it. They are inside the Kill Dungeon, a multi-floor dungeon, which they have been clearing for 3 months since joining the company. By now, they know the layout, enemy patterns, and spawn locations. Toru is confident that no tester can clear it better than him. Elsewhere, Jiro and his party are also inside the dungeon. He leads them forward, cutting down goblins with his sword. Being back there reminds him of training days. Kaido is surprised that goblins keep appearing endlessly. Jiro says they must eventually stop, but Minami suggests focusing on breaking through instead, believing there is no end and they should push deeper. Everyone notices the goblins are getting stronger as they advance. Kaido points out that some are even armed. Minami realizes the pattern and identifies it as a structured strategy. Jiro is impressed by her analysis, thinking her gaming background may be helping, but her tactical sense is clearly strong. Thanks to her guidance, they avoid unnecessary fights and continue deeper. Eventually, they clear the dungeon within the recorded time. Outside the exit, they talk when Toru suddenly appears. Jiro greets him with a smile, but Toru is visibly agitated after realizing they cleared the same dungeon. Toru insists no one can match his party since they have already reached the deepest level, the 20th floor. One of his teammates says Jiro's group probably cannot even reach the 10th floor and looks forward to their failure. 10 days later, Jiro meets Suera. She is surprised by his visit after he requests access to company equipment. Jiro says he wants to check something in real time. While speaking with Suera, the others explore the room and find a desk and a strange display device. Minami presses a button on the receiver, activating the screen. Jiro invites Suera to join them, and together they begin watching the performances of other parties. Toru and his party are standing inside the dark dungeon, not surprised by the usual gloomy atmosphere. The dungeons are always like this, and Toru encourages everyone by saying that they already know everything about the layout and the enemy's locations. They stand there already expecting the swarm of goblins that comes running toward them. He tells everyone to stay calm and proceed as they always do. One of the magicians uses an enchanted sword spell, and they begin fighting through the goblins, easily cutting down the demons. Their streak of confidence is interrupted when the goblins suddenly begin throwing stones at them. Toru is shocked to see that this is the first time something like this has happened. The continuous barrage of stones makes it difficult for them to focus on their magic. One of the girls asks Toru to do something. He stands there confused because this is the first time the dungeon has behaved this way. As Toru looks carefully at the goblins, he notices one of them making signals. It surprises him to see that this goblin appears to be giving commands to the others. Toru instantly realizes that something is wrong and that this may be something they cannot handle. Even so, he knows what they need to do and tells everyone that they have to leave before they are completely surrounded by the enemies. He asks his teammates not to use magic and instead switch to close combat. One of the girls points out that they are not used to close quarters combat. Inside the surveillance room, Jiro watches Toru and his team struggle. Kato points out that the change did not cause much damage to Toru's party, but it has prevented them from using magic. Suera is confused after seeing all of this. Jiro explains that a little while ago, he got into a bit of a squabble with them. Suera is shocked that he never told her about it. Jiro simply apologizes while silently thinking that this is exactly why he did not tell her, because she immediately starts worrying about him. He explains that it happened because of a misunderstanding and admits that he is partly to blame because he never did anything about the rumors spreading throughout the company. Kaido seems a bit happy to see Jiro getting scolded like that. Jiro continues, explaining that this is why he decided to take revenge on Toru in this manner. He once again repeats that small grudges should be paid back through work. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Toru's teammates notice that the enemies are becoming stronger and are even beginning to cooperate with one another. This never happened during their previous runs through the dungeon. Toru gets a bad feeling about the situation. When he looks around, it annoys him that they are still only on the 3rd floor despite putting in so much effort. One of the girls becomes frustrated and shouts that this is happening because Toru failed to give commands quickly enough. In response, he also shouts back, saying that he is doing his best and that they are the ones failing to keep up with him. The others immediately tell both of them to stop arguing as they notice another group of enemies approaching. This comes as another shock because these goblins should not appear until the 5th floor. Meanwhile, in the monitoring room, Suera is surprised to hear that the monster's behavior patterns and composition are changing. Jiro explains that each floor can only hold a limited amount of mana, and that this constraint is what drives the shifts. He designed the system to reduce monster numbers while increasing the strength of individual units. To achieve this, he introduced powerful frontline demons and commander-type entities. These disrupt a party's ability to use magic effectively, forcing close-quarters combat. That, in turn, raises energy consumption and exposes the weaknesses of teams that rely heavily on rear support. Masaru notices that Toru's party is starting to lose focus, and their stamina is clearly dropping. In his view, they are struggling because anyone who wants to protect something must be ready to risk their life for it. Inside the dungeon, Toru's party continues to deteriorate under pressure. Jiro's team watches with growing anticipation, since their goal from the start was to wear Toru's group down as much as possible. Jiro observes the situation with quiet amusement, noting that the boss monster normally guarding the deepest part of the 5th floor is now appearing near the entrance. He understands how dangerous this shift will be for Toru's party. Moments later, Toru and his group are suddenly confronted by the demon boss. Exhausted and barely able to maintain formation, they realize they have almost no chance of winning against it in their current state. Toru has already noticed that the dungeon has changed. He feels as though the enemies are actively trying to kill him. Suddenly, a thought strikes him. Jiro might be behind all of this. The realization only makes him even more agitated. One of his teammates suggests that they should retreat. Toru immediately shouts that he is definitely going to defeat this monster and that he will never back down. He knows that everyone is stressed and exhausted because they are facing this demon for the first time, but he has no intention of holding back. Before Toru can actually attack, one of his team members suddenly gets struck from behind. When he turns around, he finds Delkaran lying on the floor as several goblins attack her. Toru is completely startled because it looks like the enemies from the upper floor have also come down here. He freezes in shock as they drag away Karen. Struggling to decide what to do, he turns back toward the demon that is fighting him in the same room. Suera watches everything with shocked eyes. Kaido and Minami both seem really happy to see that their plan has worked. When Suera asks if they are the ones responsible for these improvements in the dungeon, Minami agrees and says that they are still not satisfied. She explains that they have already set up all sorts of traps and strategies all the way to the 3rd floor. She adds that they have prepared things like the Goblin Phalanx and Goblin Ninja Poison Dart units, and they also want to see those in action. Meanwhile, somewhere in a meeting room, someone asks if they have heard about Jiro Tanaka. Kyo replies that he knows about him because Jiro was the one who messed with his dungeons. The news greatly pleases him because the testers are now competing against each other. Fujio adds that this is exactly what the company aims for. He also points out that the dungeon difficulty level increases when testers compete with one another, meaning it can eventually become a dungeon that even heroes might not be able to survive. Kyo comments that it took some time for things to reach this point, while Fujio adds that they are no longer looking at how to beat the dungeon, but instead how to improve it. Another person points out that it is almost like they are strangling themselves by removing support jobs for the testers, but they do not think anyone realizes that yet. They all agree that things are becoming much livelier because of the competition. Kigyou adds that since Jiro has been motivated, he is operating on an entirely different level. Later that evening, Jiro and Suera are sitting outside together. Suera tells him that the president has decided to introduce a ranking system for testers within the company, and that special rewards will be given several times a year. She explains that this happened because of Jiro's improvements and how they changed the momentum of the company. Even the chairman general, who was originally skeptical about the entire corporate expansion idea, has become much more involved because of it. She thanks Jiro for everything he has done and advises him to tell her in advance if he plans something like this again in the future. Jiro listens to all of the compliments with a smile. Suera once again says that she is happy that he is here. As she speaks gently, she reaches forward and grabs both of his hands, instantly making him blush. After his meeting with Suera, Jiro meets with his team at another training ground and says that they need to prepare for the next time they enter the dungeon. He explains that even if they cannot conquer it, it is still important that they prepare an escape route for retreat. Kato notices how excited Jiro seems and points out that something good must have happened. Hearing that, Masaru asks Kato to throw some balls at him so he can practice against stone-throwing goblins. Kato agrees, and the two get ready to train. Suddenly, Kato throws an arm around Masaru's shoulder and pulls him away. He quietly whispers that Masaru needs to protect Minami. Jiro is happy to see his team getting along with one another. Watching them interact like this gives him a sense of satisfaction. Suddenly, an alarm begins blaring throughout the entire arena. The sound surprises everyone because nobody knows what is happening. Jiro also seems confused since they never received any notification about an evacuation or anything similar. He recalls how something similar happened once before when he was caught completely off guard. Before anyone can react, something enormous suddenly crashes through the doors. In the higher-ups meeting room, one of the generals gives a briefing about a new golem type called Blurred. The president listens intently as the general explains how they want to build a highly advanced unit and give the development department a monopoly over its production. Evia points out that the development department is currently free, so they can accept the request. After hearing that, the president agrees to the general's proposal. Once they are done discussing that matter, Evia mentions that she and almost half of the 7 generals are planning to go on a business trip sometime soon. The president gives her permission to do so. He then turns to another general and asks whether she is confident about the project. The general replies that they have studied sports, culture, and plan to incorporate those concepts into the golems. Along with maintaining high-level performance as a basic requirement, they also intend to add unusual features designed to surprise opponents. They are not only focusing on performance but also on creating a remarkable design. A great deal of information has gone into the planning process. Meanwhile, in the training hall, Kaido and the others are suddenly attacked. As Dazal presents the golem, the general is shocked by the amount of magic power it possesses. The president smiles after seeing that and says that he is already looking forward to the results. In the training hall, Jiro and his team stand frozen in shock as they come face to face with the massive creature. Jiro slowly realizes that the alarm may have been triggered because of this golem as he stares at the giant monster. Kaido points out that it kind of looks like Hokkaido. Jiro asks if he means the monster ranger character that they used to imitate when they were children. Minami also notices the resemblance and agrees that what they are saying is true. Just then, an announcement echoes through the speakers. It states that a new type of Blurred is currently on the loose and that members of the Demon Lord army are attempting to capture it. The announcement further instructs all citizens to evacuate immediately and avoid engaging the creature under any circumstances. At that moment, Kaido notices that the monster also appears to be armed. Jiro points out that since they are not inside a dungeon, there are no safety precautions if they die here. Kaido remains confident and says that, compared to a minotaur or a crystal dragon, this thing should be easy to handle. The blood immediately reacts to Kaido, recognizing him as a threat. With a single strike, it sends him flying through the air and crashing into a wall. Seeing this, Jiro immediately springs into action and tells the kids to take care of Kaido while he moves forward. Watching the monster knock Kaido out with a single hit makes Jiro deeply concerned about the kind of power this thing possesses. He can tell that this is a genuine emergency. This monster seems to be on an entirely different level. Running toward the creature, Jiro draws his sword and attacks with full force. He is shocked when the monster actually blocks the strike. In the very next moment, the monster counters with a slash, and Jiro barely manages to dodge it. He quickly notices that the creature possesses incredible speed and overwhelming power. Its attacks are incredibly sharp and precise. Jiro immediately understands that this monster is genuinely trying to kill him. If he fails to stop it here, it is going to cause serious damage. While he continues fighting with everything he has, Elsewhere, Suera rushes into a room where she finds Royos lying on the ground. When she asks what happened, he explains that the new type blurred that Kigyou was developing has escaped. Somehow, it managed to free itself after absorbing the magical energy flowing throughout the cavern. He explains that the unit was personally designed by General Kigyou and is extremely dangerous if it becomes fully active on its own. Some of the others add that the development department poured all of its effort into creating it, which is why they know just how dangerous it truly is. Royce points out that ordinary testers will not be able to do any meaningful damage to the blurred because it was specifically designed to become a floor boss within a dungeon. Back in the training hall, Jiro is struggling heavily against the monster, but he remains determined to protect his party. Despite taking numerous hits, the monster continues functioning perfectly without showing any signs of fatigue. Suddenly, Kaido comes running back into the battle and attempts to strike the monster. Jiro is surprised to see him return, as Kaido shouts that the monster hit him incredibly hard. From the side, Masaru reports that they have already used all of their recovery items. Since he has spent most of his magic power, his abilities are also beginning to weaken. At that moment, Minami steps forward and casts a power enhancement spell, giving all of her teammates renewed energy. As Jiro and Kaido continue battling the monster relentlessly, they gradually become exhausted because none of their attacks seems to inflict any meaningful damage. Even after receiving Minami's enhancement, Kaido continues getting pushed back by the creature. Suddenly, the monster unleashes Sword Flash, sending Jiro flying backward with tremendous force. The head to seam slowly settles to Jiro as he starts coughing blood and struggles to stand back up. He can admit that his body is reaching its limits, but he thinks that being crushed by a vanguard like this is not good. Just then, the monster notices the magicians and initiates the destruction sequence. When Jiro notices that the kids are in danger, he quickly gets back up and runs to protect them. Masaru also runs in front of Minami so she does not get hit by the monster. In the control room, everyone is running around trying to locate the blurred. They are shocked that no one has found it yet when one of the soldiers says that it looks like the blurred has activated its magic stealth armor. The leader tells them to find it using infiltration techniques. One of the members asks why Avia, the leader in charge of the area, is out of the company today. A girl replies that the president is also away at this point. As they argue, one soldier says it is good that they are not being exposed instantly. They would have been scolded for this kind of situation. Just then, they receive a report that Hoku and Fujio have defeated one unit each. Meanwhile, Fujio, who has already dealt with the monster blood, comments that it was enjoyable to handle. He says this kind of creation is exactly what is expected from the Machine King. However, he also feels a slight concern, thinking about what would have happened if lower-ranked personnel had faced it. At the same time, Suera rushes through the corridors, feeling increasingly uneasy. She knows Jiro and his team are in the training area, where safety precautions are currently disabled. Normally, she stays with them until Masaru fully masters his recovery magic, but now she worries about the blurred reaching them. When she finally arrives, she is shocked by the scene. Kaido, Minami, and Masaru sit frozen with stunned expressions, while Jiro stands in front of them, blood running down his side. Masaru and Minami watch with shocked expressions as blood pours from the deep wound on Jiro's shoulder. Slowly, he slumps down onto the floor. Suera also comes running into the training ground. As she looks at the scene in front of her, memories begin flashing through her mind. When she first met Jiro, she did not expect much from him. It was not because of anything about him personally, but because of how bad her luck had been. At the company, it is Suera's job to interview human applicants, yet every person she hired ended up being very low level. In the first place, only a handful of people would even come for an interview. The ones who did show up usually smiled bitterly once they learned about the company. Even if some of them decided to join, they would end up quitting shortly afterward. Meanwhile, her coworkers gradually secured one tester after another, while she was left struggling with her bad luck. Even Evia eventually told her that she acknowledged how hardworking Suera was and that none of it was her fault, but people had started to wonder whether she was simply not suited for the job. While she was dealing with all of that, Jiro suddenly decided to visit the company. She interviewed him without expecting much. At the time, she simply wanted to get the process over with and feel disappointed later. However, to her surprise, when she showed the company to him, he looked genuinely happy. Even after seeing that expression, she told herself not to get her hopes up. Jiro even possessed a high aptitude for magic, which gave her another reason to be hopeful. This time, however, Jiro did not quit. He was not scared away despite the difficult environment. The harsh training could not break him, and he managed to survive everything that was thrown at him. Sometimes she worried about him because Jiro looked like a child who genuinely enjoyed all of this. Without even realizing it, Suera gradually began spending more and more of her time watching him. Whenever he went through brutal training under Kigyou and Fujio, she was always there to heal his injuries afterward. Jiro would constantly complain about how he could not take any more, while Suera would repeatedly tell him to be careful. Yet every time he thanked her with that bright smile on his face, Suera felt incredibly happy. Now, the person with that bright smile, the person she had come to like, is lying on the ground severely injured. The sight fills her with overwhelming rage. She glares at the demon robot, blurred, and shouts at it in fury. The monster robot detects her as a threat and immediately initiates its annihilation sequence. It locks onto its target and prepares to strike Suera, who is kneeling beside the injured Jiro. Looking at his wound, Suera quickly heals him first, impressing Masaru with her talent. She then slowly turns toward the monster, determined to make it pay. She begins casting a spell, bringing shadow and flame magic together before her and manifesting a massive orb of power. Up until this point, Suera has acted mostly like a soldier, but she is actually a spirit magic caster. She summons a spirit and orders it to destroy the monster. A fierce battle erupts in the hall. The summoned spirit crashes into the seemingly undefeated monster and destroys it in a single blow. Meanwhile, Kigyou and Fujio are also watching the entire ordeal. They comment on how the young lady from the department handled everything. Kigyou points out that Suera chose a destructive spirit, one that will not leave even a trace of dust behind once it attacks. Fujio comments that it only shows how much Suera actually cares about Jiro. When Jiro slowly opens his eyes and finds himself staring at the white walls of the infirmary, both Masaru and Minami are extremely happy to see that he is awake. Jiro immediately notices that he cannot move very easily. Masaru quickly tells him not to push himself too hard. Suddenly, Minami bursts into tears of happiness after seeing him awake. Their leader has finally regained consciousness. Masaru also looks incredibly relieved, while Kaido comments that Jiro has been asleep for 2 whole days. Looking at the 3 members of his party gathered around him, Jiro finally asks what happened to that robot. Kaido quickly explains that Jiro almost died because he suffered a severe gash on his shoulder. He adds that if Suera had not arrived in time, nobody knows what might have happened. Jiro still feels guilty that he could not stop the robot monster. Kaido agrees that they were defeated, but he also points out that if things had gone differently, all of them would probably be dead by now. Masaru suddenly remembers something and says that he should go tell the doctor that Jiro has finally woken up. He also asks Minami to come with him instead of standing there crying. After the 2 younger members leave the room, Kaido asks Jiro something that has been on his mind. Curious, he asks whether this really is a black company after all. Instead of answering him, Jiro simply closes his eyes and pretends to go back to sleep. On the other side, Evia is furious about the incident and demands a full report from her subordinates. She orders them to bring in everyone who was responsible for the research, along with the security personnel involved. Stepping forward, she announces that the president will also be arriving shortly. Evia is frustrated that Amelie ended up giving her unnecessary work, and now this incident has happened on top of everything else. Turning back toward her subordinates, she asks about Zero's condition. They informed her that he was injured during the incident. Evia is relieved to hear that he did not die because, in addition to being a tester, he is also working as a researcher. If something had happened to him, it would have been a violation of the company's no-death policy. She knows that an incident like that would have caused employees to lose confidence in the company and potentially start quitting. On top of that, she is aware that it would have put the president in a very bad mood. Thinking about everything that has happened, Evia also finds herself worried about Suera's mental state after the incident. People throughout the company are still discussing the incident caused by the blurred. One employee says that Evia was extremely angry about the situation because there had been a casualty among the testers, even though nothing serious ultimately happened. It also looks like the company's operations will be suspended for a while. Hearing this makes the others worried about what will happen next because, for the first time in a long while, things were finally starting to get back on track. Memoria, the vampire shopkeeper, has also heard the news. Another shopkeeper comments that the suspension of operations will probably be good for business. He asks for Memoria's opinion as well, but she seems more interested in why he is there. The man replies that it is because they are both free. Memoria simply responds that having him around is a bit of a nuisance. Ignoring him, Memoria then turns toward the other people who are bothering her as well. She asks why they are all there. Kaido replies that they cannot go into the company because everyone is currently on edge. Memoria becomes annoyed that they are treating her shop like a refuge. Kaido says that they cannot really help it because they have free time right now. His answer only seems to annoy her even more. Their conversation is interrupted when Hans asks what they are all planning to do next. Seeing Kaido's confused reaction, Hans explains that security precautions are going to be increased after the recent incident. However, now everyone has seen firsthand how dangerous their work truly is. Because of that, he wants to know whether they plan to stay or run away. His question causes all three of them to think seriously about their future. Meanwhile, Suera is standing at her desk, staring into space. One of her friends notices that she has been in that state for quite some time. Evia appears to be the most irritated by the situation. Evia points out that a full week has passed since the incident and that Suera's gloomy mood is only making things worse. She tells the other girls to do something about it, but they refuse, saying that they have already tried reaching out to her and that nothing worked. One of Suera's friends suggests that it is probably because of the burden of her supervisory responsibilities. After all, the incident had been life-threatening. Evia immediately dislikes that comment and asks whether that was meant as a jab at her, since she is also the head of security. She then walks over to Suera, who instantly asks if she will face disciplinary action. Instead of responding directly, Evia suddenly grabs Suera and says that if Suera wants punishment that badly, then she will give it to her. Evia tells her that she should go and do the one job she is actually good at. Suera does not understand what Evia means, but Evia does not bother explaining any further. At the same time, Jiro is sitting alone in his room. He thinks about how this is the first time he has had so much free time since joining the company. He wants to thank Suera for saving him, but it seems like she has been avoiding him. He has even started smoking again despite having quit only a short while ago. Jiro recalls how close he came to dying during the incident. It serves as a reminder that it is incredibly easy to die in places where safety precautions are not in place. He admits that everyone had become a little overconfident. They had made friends, things had been going smoothly, and they had started taking that stability for granted. The incident forces him to remember just how dangerous this job really is. He begins thinking seriously about whether he should quit. Deep down, however, Jiro already knows what his answer is going to be. Just as he is thinking about meeting Suera, Evia suddenly appears in his room and comments that she had the same idea. Jiro is shocked by her sudden appearance, while Evia casually explains that it is simply a transfer-type skill and that he should be grateful to see her in his room. Before he can say anything else, Evia says that she is in a hurry and tells him to hold out his arms. Jiro has no idea what is happening. Evia tells him to hold on properly. The next moment, he is shocked when Suera suddenly appears in his arms. Without giving any explanation, Evia immediately leaves the room. Before departing, she warns them not to make a demon like her become any gentler than she already is. After she leaves, Jiro asks Suera if she is alright. A deep blush covers Suera's face as she reminds him to put her down already. Jiro nervously scratches his face when Suera notices the smell of cigarettes and asks if he has started smoking again. Unable to give a proper reply, Jiro remains silent. Suera gently admits that she is worried about him. More than that, she is terrified by the thought of losing him. During the incident, she felt as though she would never be able to stand on her feet again after seeing what had happened to him. That is why she wants him to quit the company. Suera understands that she is being selfish by asking something like this. She knows that it goes completely against the company and even against the Demon Lord army itself. Even so, if it means that Jiro can stay alive, then she does not care about being punished or even getting fired. Instead of answering her immediately, Jiro suddenly places both hands on her shoulders and gently pulls her closer. He quietly tells her that he likes this job and has no intention of quitting. When Suera reminds him that he has just gone through a life-threatening situation, Jiro simply replies that he still wants to remain there. Wanting to understand his decision, Suera asks him for the reason. In response, Jiro suddenly pulls her into a hug. He admits that he cannot properly put it into words, but he feels that staying there is the right decision for him. More than anything, he feels that he was meant to meet her there. Elsewhere, the president is relieved to learn that Jiro has decided to stay with the company. He comments that this outcome is exactly what he would expect from a demon like Evia, someone who can manipulate people's hearts and who does not hesitate to make use of her subordinates' feelings in order to retain employees. The president says that he is glad he left the Human Resources Department in her hands. He jokingly comments that, in a way, that makes Evia a cupid. The remark only manages to slightly worsen Evia's already bad mood. Soon afterward, the two of them meet with Amelie and ask how she intends to take responsibility for the recent incident. The president admits that he is partially responsible as well because he entrusted the matter to her in the first place. Even so, it is still his duty to pass judgment on her actions. He is relieved that nobody lost their life during the incident, but he still wants to know whether Amelie is being sincere. A blinding light suddenly shoots from his hand, causing the entire room to fill with tension and fear. Amelie calmly explains that they already had their next plan prepared. She admits that the recent experiment was a failure, but she also points out that they managed to gather the data they wanted. She then asks for permission to turn the project into a success and says that accomplishing that goal will be their way of atoning for the incident. Evia becomes visibly angry after hearing those words, while the president suddenly starts laughing. To everyone's surprise, he grants Amelie permission to proceed. When Evia tries to object, the president stops her. He then turns back to Amelie and warns her that there will not be a next time. He further comments that it is a good change for Amelie if she truly intends to become stronger and move forward from this failure. After leaving the office, Amelie seems dejected that those four managed to survive the incident, which means that they failed their mission. According to her calculations, when someone crosses the boundary between life and death, the demon crest grows exponentially. However, she is worried about what would happen if they were dealing with the hero's party instead. If that were the case, she does not think the current results would be good enough. That is exactly why, next time, they are determined to achieve their objective. A few days later, Jiro asks his party to thoroughly check their equipment. Since this is their first assignment in quite some time, he wants everyone to be especially careful. Once everyone finishes checking their equipment, Jiro turns toward the group and asks if they all understand what they need to do. The party happily agrees. After that, Jiro asks if they are truly okay with staying there with him and whether they will regret that decision later. Kato immediately shouts that he still has not fulfilled his dream of becoming a millionaire and building a harem, so there is no way he is going to quit now. Masaru admits that he felt frustrated during the previous incident because he was unable to do anything useful. Minami comments that Masaru sounds like a real man. When Jiro asks for her opinion as well, she replies that, just like Masaru, she also hates losing. After everyone confirms their decision, Suera arrives and tells Jiro to be careful. Jiro responds to her with a smile. Seeing this, Kaido immediately asks if they finally made it official. Meanwhile, Masaru and Minami happily run over to Suera and tell her how glad they are that the two of them finally got together. Kaido is the only one who does not seem happy about the situation. Feeling betrayed, he sulks to himself as Masaru goes to comfort him. Once Suera reminds Jiro not to start smoking again, they finally set off on their mission. As they make their way forward, Jiro tells everyone not to let their guard down. He reminds them to stay focused at all times and to avoid getting injured during the mission. The entire party is determined as they move forward together. They plan to clear every dungeon standing before them. As for Jiro, he has an even bigger goal in mind. His ultimate objective is to create a dungeon that even the heroes themselves cannot conquer.
Here I am, know it's been a while.